So again, thank you everyone for joining. We will get started here shortly. If you can just remember to mute yourself as you come into the space, that will make it easier for us as we get to listen to individuals during this time. All right. Well, we will get started and I will continue to invite individuals in as we go ahead and get going. And let me just, for one moment. Hey, Esther, sorry to interrupt you. Hey, Esther, can you turn off your screen for just your video for a moment? Thank you, everyone, for just, as we have just a moment of technical, there we go. Thank you, Esther. So let me see. There we go. So we are going to today be talking again in this series, in our last series of our Fair Housing Network, our Fair Housing Month conversations. And so thank you for joining us here today. Today we're going to be talking about affordable housing. But as we do that, I want to just kind of sort of engage you all in the mission of the Holland Human Relations Commission. And so the Holland Human Relations Commission exists to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in housing, education, employment, and public service. We advocate for all citizens with special care to underserved communities. And we do this through research, advocacy, education, mediation, and empowerment. Our vision as a commission is to be a place where all residents are honored and empowered to become productive members of the community, unhindered by bias, understanding, and conflict. And as those of you who have participated in prior ones with us know that we have kind of been doing this series and kind of building up to today's moment, which we'll talk about affordable housing and ALICE families. And we'll kind of break down a little bit more about what that means, what both of those terminologies mean as we move forward. But if you missed any of the previous conversations, please know that you can go back and view those. Those are available on the Holland Human Relations Commission's Facebook page or the City of Holland's YouTube page. You may find all of those conversations there. So as we get started though, today, I wanted to just give a moment for each of our three guests to introduce themselves. So we have Ryan Kilpatrick, who is here from Ottawa Next. We have Lynn Raymond, who is here representing the United Way, but also the Lakeshore Housing Alliance. And then we have Don Wilkinson, who is here from Habitat for Humanity. And so I'm going to ask each of them now to unmute themselves and introduce a little bit about their organizations, what their mission is, and how their sort of this topic of affordable housing or ALICE families fits in with the mission of their organization. So Ryan, I'm going to ask you to speak first, if you would, and introduce us to Ottawa Next.
Sure. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Rebecca. So again, my name is Ryan Kilpatrick. I'm the Executive Director of Housing Next. We were founded in 2018 after a long collective impact process that the United Way hosted. We actually live inside of the United Way, so we're a subsidiary organization to the United Way. And our goal is threefold. One is to really clearly understand the data in terms of how much housing do we need and at what price points, and where is it needed most. Two is to work on policy solutions with local units of government and nonprofit partners to figure out what are the obstacles that are in the way of getting more housing produced and preserving more housing as affordable. And then three is coming alongside developers, both for-profit and nonprofit, to make sure that we're getting an adequate amount of housing supply built within the community We don't do any development ourselves. What we do is try to catalyze and instigate more development from both for-profit and nonprofit partners, and then bring tools along with us to make sure that we can fill any financing gaps to get those projects fully funded.
Thank you, Ryan. And Lynn, will you introduce us a little bit to your organization as it relates to Alice families?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, today I am representing Greater Ottawa County United Way. And at its core and heart, United Way is really a philanthropic organization that's focused on creating community-based and community-led solutions to the cornerstones for a good quality of life: education, financial stability, and health. And the vision of United Way is that all people in Ottawa County will reach their full human potential. And we do that through our intended results of improving educational success, improving household financial stability, improving healthy lifestyles, and ensuring basic needs are met. And that's really how United Way's mission intersects with Alice and all households in Ottawa County, by ensuring that basic needs are met. Affordability is key to ensuring long-term housing stability.
Thank you, Lynn. And Don, can you introduce us to the mission and purpose of Habitat for Humanity?
Yes, thanks, Rebecca. I'm Don. I'm with Lakeshore Habitat for Humanity. We are one of 50-some affiliates in the state of Michigan, and we build affordable houses for home ownership. We serve the Alice population, basically from 30 to 80% of the area median income. We use a lot of volunteer labor to make our homes about $70,000 more affordable than what a commercial or a traditional builder would do. And we build solely for home ownership. So we've built 154 homes along the Lakeshore and have been around for about 30 years.
All right. Thank you, Don. And so as we get into this conversation a bit more, just a couple of reminders to everyone. We would love to hear your questions. And so if you have questions, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box. We are going to ask everyone to kind of stay muted as we go through this conversation, just because we can't, unfortunately, hear from everyone in their questions as we move through an hour session together. So if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box as we move through this. Ryan, can you talk to us a little bit right now about the issue of affordable housing in Holland, and as your organization kind of sees it right now?
Sure. So as I mentioned, one of our primary roles is really understanding the numbers and then sharing those numbers out. And so in 2018, in partnership with United Way and the Community Foundation, we conducted a housing needs assessment to get a better handle on how much more housing do we need, as well as how many households do we have who are cost overburdened within the community. And so across Ottawa County, we had about 23,000 households that were cost overburdened. And what that means is they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing. So when we talk about what is affordable, oftentimes we're talking about a relative number, right? It's relative to your income. And so what's affordable to you may not be affordable to me or my neighbor. And so it really depends on how much income your household earns collectively, and then what your rent or mortgage payment is compared to that. And if you're spending more than 30% of your gross income, we would classify that family as cost burdened or cost overburdened. So in addition to the number of households who are cost overburdened, we knew that we needed a lot more housing supply, but we didn't exactly know how much more supply we needed in the marketplace. And so we wanted to get a better understanding of exactly what did we need. And so across Ottawa County, we found that we needed roughly 7,500 additional housing units in just a 5-year period of time. And that's the period between 2018 and 2022. A little more than half of those new units needed to be rental housing, with about 2,500 of those being either low income or affordable workforce rentals. And then a little under 1,000 needing to be market rate rentals. And then similarly, we needed a lot more for sale housing. We needed more than 780 new entry level for sale homes, which is priced between 100 and 150,000. about 1,700 additional for sale houses for middle income earners between 150 and 250, and then about 1,000 additional homes for high income earners who can afford $250,000 or more. Now, what's important about this is the cost of construction right now is extraordinarily beyond what most households can afford. So all of the numbers I just gave you are citing housing that begins, for sale housing that begins at $250,000 and below. And the average single family home that is newly constructed today, unless Don and his team are building it, the typical single family home construction cost is $325,000 or more. And so that's well above what our middle income households can afford. And it's far beyond what our low income households can afford. And so in a normal, healthy market, this isn't, it's not necessarily unusual in the history of home construction for the last 75 years. What's really causing some of our biggest pinch points right now is we didn't build enough housing between 2005 and 2015 to keep up with our population growth. In fact, we built less than a third of the amount of housing that we actually needed during those years. And so we have this scarcity in the marketplace. So where lower income and middle income households used to be able to find plenty of 30 and 40 and 50-year-old homes that needed some work, but were still in good shape, and they could typically buy those homes for $150,000 or less. What we're now seeing in the city of Holland is the typical 50-year-old home in the city of Holland is now selling for an average price of $230,000. And so those home prices are well beyond what most middle income families can afford. And of course, new construction is well beyond that as well. And all of this distills back down to the issue of an inadequate amount of supply and a slow growth in wages. So we have a disparity between the rate of increase in terms of how much people are earning on an annual basis and the rate of increase in terms of the cost of construction. So home prices have grown by about 60% over the last 5 years. And in the same period of time, average wage has grown by about 5.8%. So the price of housing has increased about tenfold that of the average wage. And that's where we're really running into this issue of affordability.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Yeah, you dropped a lot of, I would say, sort of data on us there, right? And I think in a very clear and articulate way. And so thank you for that. And I think one of the things that you mentioned in there was that unless Habitat for Humanity, let's just say, is building the house, the cost of construction of new houses is sort of significantly higher than what it should be, or not should be, but what people can afford right now. Don, can you speak a little bit about how you guys are seeking to kind of meet some of that gap and kind of how your organization is intersecting with this issue of affordability?
And we appreciate all the work that Ryan's doing. So the way that Habitat for Humanity functions in meeting this need is we build a standard 3-bedroom, about 1,300 square foot home. And we do that with the majority of volunteer labor. And so as a result of that, we're able to build a house for about $70,000 less than what a typical builder would be able to build. Now we're still stuck with material prices and subcontractors and things like that. But in addition to that, when we finish the house, our homeowners are able to purchase that house from us on a mortgage that would never be more than 30% of their income. That mortgage is 0% interest rate. And the way we do that is we actually raise all the money first for that house, and then the homeowner is able to purchase that house over the next 22 to 25 years. We also provide a lot of education in that process. So our homeowner partners have to take 2 financial planning classes. One of them is typically a HUD approved class. The other one is a Dave Ramsey class. But we also give them the skills of home ownership and what they need to do to maintain their home, those types of things. So from that, we're able to serve that group of people that is making, say, between $30,000 a year and $55,000 a year through all of the programs that we put together to make that happen.
So that would be kind of the average income household of those you're serving, that $30,000 to $55,000 a year income. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that sort of mentioning that your organization both tries to reduce the cost of construction and also providing kind of access to the loans that individuals need at a lower cost is really important to name. I think one of the things though too that I want to sort of explore, and Lynn, I'm going to ask you to speak to this a little bit, is that $30,000 to $55,000 a year household might also be in this space that we call Alice families. And can you talk to us a little bit about who are Alice families? Like, we've had this acronym kind of thrown around out there. What does it stand for? Who are they? And how is your organization kind of trying to meet the needs of these families?
And we're glad, and we are really glad that this is being thrown around out there a lot. In fact, we hear it often, and I would recommend, I'll have a couple of things that you can look for more research, but the Michigan Poverty Task Force used ALICE as its benchmark for all of its 35 recommendations. And so our Michigan in particular has really embraced ALICE and all of the data surrounding it to help make goals and objectives to meet the needs of people in poverty and just below the ALICE threshold. So we're glad that it's becoming common language for folks in Michigan anyway. And it really just started out as a small study to understand the needs of struggling families in one county in New Jersey, and then over the last several years has really expanded throughout the county to provide data to now 21 states. We were fortunately in the initial cohort of data, so we have several years of data that we can look at. It really assesses the cost of living in every county and provides a comprehensive look at how families are struggling in those counties. And ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. So I'll just stop there because there's all the new data, and of course we're talking about it now because we have new data that has just come out, has been gathered in the website unitedforalice.org, and there is an enormous amount of information there and lots of specific data you can look at for demographics and household type and consequences to ALICE families. There's just an enormous amount of information there.
Yeah, can you repeat that website again? So it's
sure. Unitedforalice.org.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I know that you've mentioned there's a lot of data out there and around this. And I'm wondering if you can kind of maybe break down some of the basic understandings of it for us a little bit. So what would be the sort of income range of those who we would classify right now as being in the ALICE threshold?
The way that ALICE kind of looks at it as at its basic is how much people are spending based on the community that you live in. So the data that we're looking at goes all the way down to the city and township. So when you look at United for ALICE, you're going to be able to look at the city you live in and see exactly how much it costs for somebody to live there. And they break it down to a survival budget and a stability budget. And so for a family of four, and this is for Ottawa County, so for a family of four, and in this particular example, it's 2 adults with 2 school-age children. So the cost of living is going to go up if you have 2 children in childcare, of course, because childcare has now become the biggest cost in households with small children. So in a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 school-age children, a survival budget is about $56,000 a year. So that it doesn't even quite meet Habitat's, $55,000. So we're still struggling. And that really is we're looking at about a $28 an hour salary to meet that survival budget. And then the stability budget for two adults and 2 school-age children would be double that, $108,000 or $31 an hour wage.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, and can you give us like a picture of, I mean, so I'm thinking about that number, right? And you know, my background is in education. And so I know, for example, that a first year teacher teaching in Holland Public Schools would not be making nearly at $56,000 a year for their first year income. So can you give us though a picture of who some of these families might be, even maybe breaking down some of the demographics that Alice has around these individuals?
Yeah, so, you know, as I was thinking about this, I thought, well, I could tell a story, I could tell 100 stories. And actually, I think you all could tell stories, because 38% of the population in Ottawa County, or excuse me, in Holland, lives under the Alice threshold. And the way that United Way is talking about Alice now is really recognizing it and embracing the fact that they keep that the Alice population keeps the economy running. And so anybody who is working jobs that they will put into the category of nurturers and infrastructors, more than 60% of those jobs pay less than $20 an hour. So just an interesting exercise here. I'll just give you some data, and maybe you can, I'm guessing you're going to be able to think of somebody you know that fits into this category. So in Ottawa County, there are 5,300 single female heads of household. 4,000 of them live below the poverty level. In Ottawa County, Black households number 1,077 based on the data in the Alice report. 700 of them live under the Alice threshold. And 1/3 of Hispanic households struggle to make ends meet. So 1/3 of Hispanic households live under the Alice threshold at all, also. So I can imagine that all of you could think of someone in your life who meets one of those demographics or works one of those jobs that we see people working in restaurants, people working in any kind of food service, all of the essential jobs that we saw during COVID were all folks who are likely living under the Alice threshold.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks, Lynn. And I think that's
and also
go ahead. Yeah.
So before I forget, in the Sentinel this morning, there's a young woman who usually writes. She's a community contributor to the Holland Sentinel, and she often writes what it's like to live as an Alice family. And the article in the paper this morning is a perfect example of someone who is the struggles that somebody has in the living under the Alice threshold.
Yeah, thank you. Well, a question we had too is when we look at this, you know, the sort of issue of Alice families, right? And that really doesn't even address maybe even individuals who are single living in households and what kind of their income levels would need to be as far as that data. Do you have any data on kind of the individual level sort of salaries, Lynn?
I don't have it in front of me. I'm sorry, but the data on unitedforalice.org, it breaks it down by single households and then a variety of household types. And this year they've also included data on seniors, people above 55 years of age. And there's a senior stability budget and a senior survival budget also on there. So just putting on my Lakeshore Housing Alliance hat for a moment, what we are seeing is that one of the populations that's growing in the homeless numbers is our senior population. So it was really for the Alice researchers to include that data as well. Yeah,
thank you. Thank you. And I had someone sort of drop in the chat box to just note that oftentimes the nonprofit professionals serving these communities are also often Alice families themselves, because
yes, Ryan mentioned, are definitely our nurturers.
Yeah, and as Ryan mentioned, the growth of our salaries, our income, and housing prices there's such that tenfold gap, I think is what you named, Ryan. Ryan, can you talk to us a little bit about how your organization has seen this issue kind of change over the years in Holland? You mentioned that we maybe as a community made a mistake between 2005 and 2015 and only building a third of the housing stock that we needed. How's your organization seen? Have we gotten better at this? Are we doing better at this, or is it getting worse?
Yeah, well, I think that as a result of a lot of the work that Lynn has done and that other organizations have done longer than I've been in this role, there is much more public awareness about the issue. And there's a lot more conversation about what do we need to be doing to solve for an inadequate supply of housing at the right price points. Then there's the question of actually providing the housing and making sure that the funding is available to finance the construction or to preserve existing housing. And I think that we are getting on the right track, but we have all kinds of conditions that are outside of our control that are presenting significant headwinds, primarily the cost of construction. I'm sure Don can speak more eloquently about this than I can, but we were seeing pretty significant increases in the cost of lumber and materials prior to the pandemic. And then around last April, as lumber mills shut down and imports shut down into the US, at the same time that we had a bunch of people staying home who had nothing other to do than go to Home Depot and buy materials to do home projects, we had a significant demand for materials and not nearly enough supply coming into the system. And the supply chain is still catching up. So what I would say in terms of our overall supply, when we look at the city of Holland as an individual community, roughly 13% of the population of Holland is classified as below the poverty line. And so that would mean, to me, they would likely be the best, most important candidates for some kind of housing assistance. There is a housing choice voucher program that offers a number of vouchers within the system, but not nearly enough. So what we have then at 13% of a population of about 12,000 means we have more than 4,400 individuals who are in need of some form of housing assistance. But we have less than 1,000 subsidized units in Ottawa County. And so again, we have these disparities between the amount of support that is out there for families that need it most and the number of families that actually need it. So going forward, what we're trying to do is get as much additional housing supply into the system as possible with a focus on both low income workforce and market rate. So we want to be bringing as much of that supply into the system as we can. And we've got about 2,800 additional units that are coming online in the Holland-Zeeland market area. So between Holland, Holland Township, Zeeland, Fillmore Township, and Laketown, there's a little more than 2,800 new units. 900 of those will be income restricted. So set aside for households who are earning below 80% area median income. Now, what's important to know is the way that those income restricted units are funded is based on a tax credit model. And the tax credit model provides financing based on the income of the household. But it only targets households earning between 40% and 80% of the area median income, which means that a household earning below $26,000 a year is still going to be spending more than 30% of their income to rent a unit in an income restricted apartment complex. And so on top of those new units that are coming in, we still need additional housing choice vouchers and additional supports within the system to make sure that we can continue to care for those households that are earning below that $26,000 a year threshold.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, and that is, that is both good news that we're adding stock, but we're still clearly not where we need to be in order to meet all of the need. Don, Ryan kind of brought up a little bit of maybe how you can speak into some of these barriers. And could you talk to us a little bit about what you've seen, what your organization has seen as some of the barriers to creating more affordable housing in your sort of area?
Yeah, so Ryan's exactly right. We've seen material increases just in wood of close to 120%. In addition to that, just getting materials sometimes can be very difficult. We used to be able to order our drywall and have it delivered in 24 hours. Now you're looking at a week and a half. So there's some constraints there. The bigger constraints, though, for Habitat is being able to find affordable land. If you look at most of the subdivisions, the lots are selling between $50,000 and $100,000. To make our homes affordable, we need to be down around $25,000 for just the property. Very difficult to find. The other thing, and this is something we've been doing and it's working well for us, is we have joined with Jubilee Ministries in creating neighborhoods. Unfortunately, the cost of infrastructure is very high. It's about $550 to $600 a lineal foot to put in a road, to put in water, sewer, all of the utilities into that before you can ever start to build a home. So those are all factors that come into play in what it's keeping us from, building more affordable housing, all the time. We have started looking at multifamily homes. Habitat is all about home ownership, so there'll be condominiums, but in doing that, we're able to put 5 units on a piece of land that we could normally just build 2 units on. So that's a big plus for us as we start to move forward. And some of the municipalities have become very friendly toward that, which is very good.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that speaks to a question that I had brought up in the chat. They're asking, are there funds available for builders who are trying to build low to middle income or multifamily housing, but would lose money trying to do so with the increased costs right now?
Ryan's probably better to answer that question than I am, but let me give you kind of the world on that. There are some funds available to like Habitat for Humanity homeowners. So through the MISHTA and through the National HUD, our homeowners are able to get a $12,000 down payment assistance when they purchase the home. Unfortunately, most of the programs are really designed for rental units. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with rental units. We need several of those without a doubt. But when it comes to home ownership, there's a lot less government programs available. We do have some things through the Federal Home Loan Bank. As you know, there's several of those across the country, and it's a competitive grant, and we can apply for grants through that for funding for home ownership. But for the most part, things are available for rental properties. And I'm going to kick it over to Ryan to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so there are some federal grants available through the Home Grant Program. Those are highly cost intensive to pursue and tend to fund a couple of units at a time. And so, this is always the challenge, is there are some grant programs available that would allow us to build 1 or 2 or maybe 3 homes at an affordable price point. And then we wait 2 or 3 years before we're eligible to apply for those funds again. And while that's really important, right? We need those 2 and 3 homes at a time, in addition to 300 to 500 homes at a time. When we look at the scale of the issue, 3 homes at a time is a drop in the bucket. And so other tools that we've been exploring, and this includes projects that I'm working on with Don, are leveraging tools that would normally be reserved for other kinds of land uses that don't prohibit residential use, but kind of haven't been thought of in that way before. So using tax increment financing in a new way, using our county land bank authority in a new way. Sometimes we're able to find opportunities that allow us to offset some of the basic infrastructure costs and site preparation costs that a developer has in the process of building new homes. And if we can offset those costs and pull them out of the price of the home for the home buyer, and then finance those separately, those are opportunities to potentially reduce the cost of a home. As Don said, maybe sometimes $40,000 or $50,000 a piece, which doesn't get us all the way there, but it gets us closer to where we need to be.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think you're kind of addressing some of the ways that you collaboratively between maybe the Lakeshore Housing Alliance, United Way, Ottawa Next, Habitat for Humanity, Jubilee was mentioned in here, are sort of collaboratively trying to come up with ways to overcome some of these barriers. Can you, to any of the three of you, talk about some of the ways, like maybe it's some of the current projects that you have going on right now, or other ways that you are trying to overcome some of these barriers right now?
So I got to the mute button first.
Go ahead, Don. Yes, please.
So let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing. We actually did a joint venture a couple of years ago with Good Samaritan Ministries, where we own some property that we could have built 2 homes on. We actually went with Good Samaritan. We're able to build 4 units, not very many, but 4-unit apartment building. And the residents there will always be able to rent those units for no more than 30% of their income. So that doesn't matter if they make $10,000 a year or $40,000 a year, they can rent that for no more than 30% of their income. The second part of that is we have a joint venture going with Jubilee Ministries right now on a project on 40th Street, where we're going to build 5 homes, and we're in the process of building 5 homes, and Jubilee will build 5 homes there. And the whole idea behind that is we want to make a mixed income community. So Jubilee serves the 80 to 120% of the area median income. So we want to be able to build a community that is a mixed income community from the 30 to the 120% of the area median income. The other thing that we're doing is we have, again, with Jubilee, a project over at 36th Street, where we're going to be able to a total of 42 units. 18 of those will be Habitat homes. 24 of them will be Jubilee homes, again, serving that same population. And when we can do that, that gives us the opportunity to, like Ryan said, take advantage of some tax incremental financing. Basically, you're taking property that has a 0 tax base in it, you're upgrading it, and it actually ends up being more taxes going into the city of Holland at that point in time. And then the other 2 projects we have going on are more of our own, but we're trying to build a 5-unit condominium here in Holland Township that would serve special needs people. And again, it's for home ownership. So this is a population that would not be able to afford a home, would never be able to look at home ownership in the long run and build that equity, would be able to do that. And then we have another 5-unit condominium planned for the city of Hudsonville that'll be coming out next year. And again, it'll be a 5-unit townhome condominium. So that's, you know, between us and Jubilee, we have about 50 units that we'll be bringing on in probably the next 3 to 4 years. Yeah. That's not nearly enough, but it's all home ownership with those units.
Yeah, no, Don, that's great. And that's exciting. And also, I just want to note kind of the thread, one of the threads that we've seen through all of these conversations is just the incredible collaboration that is happening between organizations across Ottawa County who are really trying to address this issue. And I think that's such an encouraging thing to hear you sort of talk about the partnerships that you've created as you go through this, and also maybe some of the flexibility that Habitat has you know, sort of taken from their sort of single family home to moving towards these multi family dwellings. And that's it's pretty exciting. Ryan, do you want to sort of speak to some of the other projects that you are seeing and ways that the barriers are being addressed?
Yeah, well, I want to touch a little bit on what Don just said, because I think the work that they're doing is really critical, both in terms of providing additional housing supply, but also demonstrating new models for housing in our community. We've got to recognize that there's only so much land to go around, and the cost of land is expensive. And so when Habitat is able to demonstrate a project with 4 units on a single lot, we've got to be able to look at that and say, how do we do that again, right? Rather than that being a one-off that requires 2 years of pre-development planning and a lot of rigmarole with a local unit of government in order to get that approval. We've got to find ways to make that easier for Habitat to do, but also for other organizations to do. Same with those 5-unit condominiums. Building 5 units at a time is 5 times better than building 1 unit at a time. And especially when you have a model like Habitat's, where they're still providing for home ownership, and that owner occupancy on site is a really critical element. But it's far too difficult in most of our zoning districts across West Michigan to do the kind of product that Habitat is getting really good at. And so we've got to make it easier to do that in more circumstances, because otherwise it's always just going to be one at a time when we're faced with a need of 7,500.
Mm.
So the other thing that I'll say in terms of progress that we're making is we are looking at bigger areas of land that are still relatively greenfield, but close into employment and close into schools and neighborhood services that already have sewer and water service available to them. We've been partnering with a lot of for-profit developers and then making relationships with our local municipalities to ensure that we're bringing tools to the table to offset some of those high costs, while simultaneously requiring those developers to maintain a certain level of affordability on a share of their units. And so this is how we've gotten to the 2,800 units that we have in the pipeline right now, is by having this back and forth conversation and negotiation with both developers and municipalities to talk about the need, both on the financial side and on the housing side, and to figure out how do we ensure that a percentage of those units are going to remain affordable for the long term. And so we've got to continue to have these public-private partnerships where government is at the table and the developer is at the table, and they're both giving a little bit to make sure that those projects get done.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah,
And
Lynn, go
Rebecca,
ahead.
just real quick. Yeah, so and the other way to do this is also by making existing housing affordable as well. And part of that is encouraging landlords to participate in housing programs. One of the challenges we have right now is that we have housing choice vouchers available, but there isn't available housing. And so part of that is that there just isn't stock, but also part of it is that landlords need to be encouraged to participate in those programs. So I think that's one thing. And there's also a program at Good Sam that I think goes unnoticed. Is there one of the goals that came out of the Ottawa Housing Next collective impact process was to strengthen supportive services for people who are struggling to make ends meet and participating in some of these housing programs. And so Good Sam took it upon themselves, with support from the community foundations and United Way, to create a property management arm of their housing program. And so they actually have somebody to not only do the practical work of property management, but also to create relationships with tenants and the landlords to ensure that for long-term housing stability. So those supportive services are really important to a lot of people who are struggling, don't have the social supports that many of us do. And so making sure that those are in place really helps to encourage that long-term housing stability.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lynn. I think one of the things that probably even as the host that I'm learning over the course of all these conversations is just how complex this issue is. And so if we could break it down for individuals who are on this call or who are in this sort of watching it later on, what is like one thing that you would say people can do to make an impact in this area right now? And Ryan, I'm going to let you go first on this one.
Yeah, so I think we've all got to get a little bit more comfortable with welcoming one or two additional neighbors into our neighborhood. The way that we're able to add more supply is by leveraging the existing buildings that we have today and making them more functional. So an important data point that I often cite is that in the 1950s, the average family size was 3.2 people per family. And the average home size was about 950 square feet. And now here we are 60 years later, 70 years later. The average family size is now 2.4 people, but the average home size is now 2,500 square feet. So at a time that we have reduced our average family size, we have dramatically increased our average household size. And for some people, that's really great. And I'm fully supportive of them having a big house, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for a lot of us, we live in more square footage than we need. And having an opportunity to turn an extra bedroom or turn an extra wing of the house into another home for another family that's available in the community and already has access to schools and employment and grocery stores, those are big opportunities that are not very expensive. We can do those things relatively inexpensively, and it supports both the homeowner and the tenant. And so thinking about ways that we can do that in a way that doesn't disrupt the daily life of everybody else in the neighborhood, but still allows for more housing supply in the neighborhood is really critical.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's important to name, in that just as we continue to break down some of the stigma around those individuals who need the affordable housing, it's so many people in our community who are working jobs and working to make our community better, who need some of these affordable housing options. And so just to continue to break down some of that stigma, I think is really important as well. Don, what is what is one thing that you would suggest that needs to be sort of done at this point?
I'd say one of the big things, and it's fairly painless, is just to get involved. I mean, it's very easy to get involved with Community Action House, Good Samaritan Ministries, or Lakeshore Habitat. You know, a lot of people come to me and say, well, I'd really like to volunteer, but I don't know how to swing a hammer. Well, that's okay. We have people that can teach you how to hold a hammer. But it also gives you an opportunity to meet people that you wouldn't normally meet. And one of the things, you know, I was in the industry for 40 years and I come into this role, and we had a homeowner that came in one day and said, hey, the guys at work were talking about changing a furnace filter. Do I have a furnace filter in my house? And, you know, it's just things like that that we take for granted because we grew up in a house that our parents probably showed us how to maintain and take care of. But most of the Habitat homeowners, they're the first generation to ever own a house. And so they need a little bit of mentorship. They need somebody to come alongside them and just talk to them about what it means to be a good neighbor. You know, you don't leave all your toys in the driveway every night, you put them away, those types of things. So just to try to get involved in whatever your heart feels you led to. You know, some of it is with Good Samaritan and their rental, their property management group. With Habitat, if your heart leads you to home ownership, please get involved with us, and we will be glad to get you plugged in different ways.
Thank you, Don. Actually, I'm going to take that recording of what you just said about putting all your toys away at the end of the night and let my fourth grader and second grader hear that piece so that they know that that's important. So thank you. And also to note, and one of your great employees there at Habitat wanted to just say that you guys are doing a drive-through at your 40th Street Park Vista Place development between 6 and 8. So if individuals want to come and check out the work that all of you are doing at Habitat, you can do that in the drive-through visit tonight. Lynn, can you speak to sort of one thing that you see individuals can do right now?
Sure. One of the certainly one of the things that United Way focuses on, besides giving and volunteering, it's advocating. And so there are lots of opportunities for us to advocate at the local, state, and federal level to ensure that some of these opportunities and legislation that Ryan has mentioned moves forward. So I would say locally connect with your city and township elected officials and planning commissions to let them know that you want this kind of housing in your community. Also, if you're interested in getting action alerts from United Way, you can text alerts to 50503, and you'll have lots of opportunities to communicate. There's legislation at the state level for sure that's focused on making affordable housing more accessible. So take advantage of some of those advocacy opportunities to speak for your community members.
Good, thank you, Lynn. And we'll include that website that you mentioned earlier, as well as that way to sort of text and get the alerts in the follow-up email for participants as well, if you weren't able to write that down. So thank you for that also. Another sort of naming here is Community Action House also runs a foreclosure prevention program to keep current homeowners in their homes, just like Good Sam works to keep renters in their homes. So if you are in a situation that is maybe foreclosure is on the horizon or is a possibility, reach out to Community Action House as well. How is as far as when we look at this within our community, what are some of the ways that our community is currently helping to fund some of these efforts? We had a question around, like, is the community foundation invested in this topic? How are you sort of seeing some of the funding needs being met right now? And Ryan, maybe you can speak to that one.
Yes, I can speak to some of it, and then I'm going to lean on Lynn for another number. So the Community Foundation funds Housing Next. They made a 5-year commitment to support the work of Housing Next. They also fund something called the Responsive Grant Fund that lives at the United Way. Lynn and I both sit on that board. And that is providing special grants to innovative projects. They also made a significant investment in Good Samaritan Ministries during the pandemic. And I don't have access to the exact dollar amount, but I have a feeling that Lynn might know what that number was.
Yeah, that was for that property management program. It was $125,000 over the course of, right, Brian? Is that the one you're talking about? Or no,
well, that's
talking
another
about the other one.
Yeah, no,
the
I was
other one
talking about the eviction prevention program.
Right. Yeah, so I'm not exactly certain, but I don't think I could put a pinpoint number on that, but yes, you're right.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we can find that information
kind of in that Alice threshold area, right?
Oh,
there's Drew.
Man, that just showed up on his camera.
There's Drew. You can tell us what that was. Yeah.
Do you want hey, everybody.
Sure.
I just was listening, trying to pay attention. Yeah, they invested in order to maximize public dollars. I think the Community Foundation wanted to make sure that no money was left on the table, knowing that a lot of public funding was rent dollars, direct pass through, but didn't give the capacity to operate it in a way to maximize it. So they gave us a grant of $150K in the fall, and then just another $50K grant in the late winter, just to help with this next round of eviction prevention dollars that in the fall helped about 487 families from becoming evicted. In the year ahead, we'll help another 1,500 to 2,000, we would guess.
All right. Thank you, Drew.
Foundation has been a great partner right from the very beginning. In fact, they were one of our initial investors in the Ottawa Housing Next process when we were just beginning to look at this as a whole and on a collective impact manner. So
just to give the last shout out to the Community Foundation, they also did a line of credit for $600,000. We were actually this week going to have to slow down and stop because of the amount of money pumping out that MSHDA hadn't been able to get back to us yet. And because of the Community Foundation's advocacy and opportunity to have a line of credit, that kept cash flow going, so we didn't have to slow down at all. So big shout out to the Community Foundation.
Thank you, Drew. And for those of you on the call who don't know, Drew Pierce is the Executive Director of Good Samaritan Ministries. So thank you for jumping on there and offering your wisdom as well. Well, thank you all. We're going to kind of wrap up and come to a close. If there's any other questions or anything that you as individuals want to sort of put out there right now, please feel free at this point. If any of you want to ask a question who is in the audience, or if any of the three of our guests here have anything that you want to close or say in closing, please feel free to do that as well at this point.
One thing that I want to make sure is clear as we're talking about dollars is we don't have a mechanism today that would fill the funding gap that is actually needed. So if we look at the number of new housing units that we need for the lowest income households in our community, the cost to subsidize those units after we've already leveraged state and federal dollars and traditional loans, the additional gap is about $90 million in order to get there. And that is in addition to the 23,000 households across Ottawa County that are cost overburdened and could use another $200 or $300 a month to offset their rent. That would be another $89 million a year. So we're talking very, very big numbers. And I think that we've got to have a more collective and targeted approach to thinking through how do we solve these things, because I don't think there's enough philanthropy available to us to solve for a $90 to $180 million hole.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, and I think that's a good sort of reminder to us of the sort of necessity for us to all come around this issue, and not just maybe just the community foundation or just these organizations, but us as a community to come around the complexities of all of these issues that we've talked around over the last 3 weeks. And so thank you for that reminder. Don or Lynn, anything else that you want to add into the conversation?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, you know, if you've never been in a situation, to understand what a stable home really means for people and for children especially, studies after studies after studies have shown how important stability is for students in school and how much better they do once they're into a stable, safe environment. Parents that end up in stable homes end up being able to take advantage of their employers' educational opportunities, things like that. So the whole stable home environment is such a valuable cornerstone of any community. And that's what we kind of need to be working toward. The other thing I would just say is anybody that would ever want to take a tour of a Habitat home, like Rebecca said tonight, from 6 to 9, or 6 to 8, you can drive through our 40th Street neighborhood. But in addition to that, anybody that would like to see what we build, give me a call. I'd be glad to meet you there and walk you through a home so you can see what we do.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah, I would just encourage you again to go to unitedforalice.org and dive into some of that data and use it with your organizations and with your family and friends, so that we can continue to get the information out about the struggling family, the struggling families in our community. I think that the more that data is used, the more helpful it would be to address some of the issues we've been talking about. And thank you so much, Rebecca and Esther and the Human Relations Commission, for putting this together so quickly, but really such a great series of conversations that I think have been really helpful in getting information out about housing and homelessness and affordable housing.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. Thank you. Yes, and thank you to all the participants who've either attended the calls or been parts of sort of the panels who've spoken to a lot of these really complex issues. On behalf of the Holland Human Relations Commission, we are so thankful for all of you in being interested in this topic, because we truly believe that if we care for the sort of parts of our community who most need our needs, that's really what strengthens our community, that we are only as strong as our most struggling members of our community. And so if we can really invest in some of these issues, we believe that we can grow our community even stronger than it already is. They asked where we can get the data that Ryan stated. I believe probably that unitedforalice.org probably will have some of that data, but Ryan, will send out maybe the link to Ottawa Housing Next that can have some of that data available as well. So thank you for that. And we'll put that in that follow-up email for anybody who is interested. So thank you all for coming and for being a part of this. We look forward to future conversations around these issues and topics. So have a great rest of your day.